Hello everyone, and welcome back to a special episode of Trading Secrets. Today, I will be celebrating 20 years of what I consider, and believe to be 100% right about, is the best movie ever made. Today, I will be talking about Lagaan. I have watched this movie at least once every year since it's come out, and it genuinely blows my mind every single time. But instead of just talking about Lagaan for 20 straight minutes, I decided to put a spin on it. So today I will be sharing with you the history of the British Raj with 20 facts told through the story of Lagaan. It is, if you will, my love letter to the movie and to every single person who worked on it and made it happen. So shall we? Oh, and I must give a spoiler warning because I will be telling facts all the way to the end of the movie. As this movie covers a wide variety of topics and issues, I will also be covering a wide variety of topics and issues. So let's go!
सन 1893 चंपानेर देश के बीचों बीच बसा एक छोटा सा गांव.
Okay, so first fact. In my Indo-Dutch video, I discussed how early colonialism began. Towards the end of the VOC's time in India, the British had acquired all of their establishments and had started expanding their own. The British East India Company, that started in 1600, schemed with and connived against every possible ruler in the Indian subcontinent, and one by one took control over large territories of Indian land. However, in 1857, several Indian kingdoms revolted against the company's rule. The company's governance was seen as a failure by the British government. So in 1858, the British Crown, i.e. Queen Victoria, officially became the ruler of British India. So this was just a quick summary for those of you who may not know the difference between pre-1857 East India Company rule and the post-1857 British Raj.
इस दोगले खेल की बदौलत अंग्रेज उन राजाओं के साथ साथ चंपानेर प्रांत के राजा से भी लगान वसूल करते थे.
Post 1857, India was charged with huge taxes to pay off the monetary setback that the British government faced because of the revolt. And the biggest source of income for the government continued to be land revenue in the form of agricultural yields. Another such tax was on salt, which Mahatma Gandhi famously marched against in an event called the Salt March.
राजा इसमें से एक हिस्सा रखकर बाकी अंग्रेज के हवाले कर देता था. इस तरह अंग्रेज मुट्ठी बुलंद होती गई.
The British brought in the policy of commercialization of Indian agriculture, resulting in the market-oriented production of tea, opium, sugar, jute, coffee, and indigo. Most of these cash crops, which were forced on the Indian peasants, rendered their farmlands infertile after a few seasons, leaving no room for any other crop to grow on it.
अब बता अब रही है इतने वक्त के बाद अब तू बैठ यहाँ हम चले.
भुवन माफ कर दे.
So that is a cantonment. A word originally borrowed from French, is a very British Raji terminology, used to describe a permanent military garrison established in each territory and presidency. There are or were over 100 of these just scattered all over the Indian subcontinent, usually established beyond the walls of the crowded native cities.
हम अपनी प्रजा की तरफ से एक दरख्वास्त लेकर आए हैं.
दरख्वास्त? Well, good morning, Eliza.
Good morning.
Your Highness, पेश करता हूँ मेरी प्यारी बहन Elizabeth. कल रात को ही आई है लंदन से.
So this fact blew me away. Pre-1857, British East India Company officers were very likely to take an Indian wife or procreate with an Indian woman to produce heirs. These heirs were allowed to go back to England and get a formal education, despite being half British, half Indian. But then, apart from the revolt of 1857, one international thing changed everything. The building of the Suez Canal in 1869 cut down the travel time from 3 months to a mere 3 weeks. So now British women came to India in hundreds to find themselves a rich British match. The number of the British women in the Northwest Province, where this movie is technically set, grew from 5,000 in 1872 to 42,001 by 1901. And it was only after the ease of traveling was introduced did the British suddenly care about the purity of their race.
हमारे गोश्त खाने से मंदिर का क्या ताल्लुक?
कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है। सिर्फ मैं आपको गोश्त खाते हुए देखना चाहता हूँ।
So this scene is pretty self-explanatory. The British manipulated Indian kings and armies to break their beliefs and convictions. Every one of us studied it in school, that the British cartridges were laced with either cow or pig fat that the Indian soldiers would have to bite off before loading their Enfield rifles, thus insulting both Hindus and Muslims in the Indian army.
Come on, Raja ji. सिर्फ दुगना लगान ही तो है। और फिर आप कुछ भी तो नहीं खाते।
Khaki, which is now one of the most common uniform colors for authorities everywhere, found its start in India. The British were the first to use khaki as a color for their troops in the British Indian Army, officially adopting in 1867. The word khaki itself comes from the Urdu/Persian word khak, meaning dust or dirt.
इस साल जितना गेहूं बाजरा चावल लगान पड़ता है उसका 2 गुना लगान वसूला जाएगा।
दुगना लगान! राक्षस! अरे गरम चिमटा से गाल की चला मार! हमारी हालत चुकी है क्या राजा से? फिर भी दुगना लगान!
Indian agriculture has over centuries relied on the Indian monsoons and really developed alongside it. There used to be occasional famines which simply could not be curtailed, but the British introduction of cash crops and heavy taxes, as I mentioned earlier, plummeted the agricultural sector and thus the welfare of the local population to crazy lows. Between 1850 and 1899, nearly 24 separate famines were recorded, resulting in the British government announcing the 1883 Famine Codes to offer some relief to the agricultural sector.
हम आप सबका साथ चाहते थे। गांव का कोनो आदमी तुम्हारे इस पागलपन में साथ नहीं देगा भुवन। मगर इस्माइल,
बस भगवान, बहुत होगा वहाँ। अब एक ही आस है।
हम सब लोग एक बार फिर राजा जी के पास जाएंगे और जान बचाने की गुहार करेंगे।
So I really like this scene because as the camera pans around the village council, you really understand the societal structure of the Indian village. Though around 90% of the population was rural in those days, every village tended to be quite small, with an average population of 500 residents, and they were really set in their traditional ways. Only the men talk, and the women are made to stand at a distance. And as the crowd disperses, we see the protagonist's widow mother, who is made to stand at the back of the meeting, entirely voiceless. So the Indian society had plenty of its own hierarchical problems. Oh, by the way, I skipped a bit, so if you're feeling a bit lost, don't worry, I've got you covered. Now, the British have challenged the Indian villagers to a cricket match, and if the Indian villagers win, no tax. But if they lose, triple tax. Teen guna lagan.
Ram Singh, can I trust you?
Of course, Mim Sahib.
No one should know about this.
All right, Mim Sahib. किसी को पता नहीं चलेगा.
The British educated people of the higher castes to work as interpreters for them. Everything was divide and rule. On one hand, they would be entrusted with the education of British people on local Indian customs, and on the other, used as tools to convince the local population of the modernity and superiority of the British.
Mim Sahib पूछ रही है कि तुम इस खेल के बारे में क्या जानते हो?
बहुत कुछ 6 डंडियां हुए हैं तीनी तरफ तीनों तरफ दुई लोग हाथ में फल्ली लेकर डंडियों के आगे खड़े होते हैं एक ससुरा दौड़ के डंडियों के पास से गोला फेंकत है और फल्ली वाला फल्ली से गोले को दे घुमाता है और फिर सब जने तितर बितर भागे लगत है उनमें से एक गोला लपक लेता है और जौन आदमी पहले गोला फेंका था ऊ के पास वापस देता है फिर दौड़ के गोला फेंकत है और ये फिर फल्ली घुमाता है बस दिन भर ही चलत रहता है गोला फेंक फल्ली घुमा गोला फेंक फल्ली घुमा क्यों भाई हाँ
मेम साहब I can't translate all.
So, apart from being my favorite scene in the whole movie, the British introduced cricket to India and the rest of the British colonies all over the world towards the end of the 18th century. The Parsi community in Bombay created the first Indian cricket club in 1848 and called themselves the Oriental Cricket Club.
There are 3 main aspects to cricket: batting, bowling and fielding.
खेल के 3 खास हिस्से हैं, बल्लेबाजी, गेंदबाजी और क्षेत्र रक्षण।
बाप रे इतनी गाड़ी भाषा तो हमारा ताओ न समझे
What did he say?
He said, this language even his ancestors will not understand.
Language was not spared from the British policy of divide and rule. From 1700s onwards, the British were determined to wipe out traces of the former Mughal influence in India. And with the help of the educated elites, they pushed for the de-Persianized version of Shuddha Hindi, which Ram Singh speaks. This pitted people who spoke Urdu and other Indian languages, such as Avdi, which I believe the villagers in here speak, against the establishment and against each other. Because now, they were forced to either use Hindi or English.
We also understand that if you lose this so-called match, you will cancel their taxes for the next 3 years.
Not just Champagnat, but the entire province.
But they're going to win.
You're missing the whole bloody point.
In the pre-1857 era, young British officers acted with an inflated sense of autonomy and power. They could impose their own taxes and pocket whatever they wished. They were corrupt little shits called nabobs, which is an anglicized version of the word nawab.
मैं देवा सिंह सोढ़ी धौलपुर से आया हूँ सुना है अंग्रेज़ों के खिलाफ लड़न वास्ते तुसी कमर कसी है
हाँ लेकिन लाठी भाले से नहीं गेंद बल्ले से
लाठी भाले से हो या गेंद बल्ले से मैं हमेशा अंग्रेज़ों के खिलाफ हर जंग में शामिल होना चाहता हूँ
Though the most well-known chapters of the Indian independence movement took place in the 20th century, rumblings of discontent and a nationalist movement were already strong by the time that this movie is set. Though more confined to the urban and educated areas, many organizations were started by the 1880s to challenge British rule in India. The Indian National Congress held its first meeting in 1885 in Bombay with demands that the British curtail the amount of Indian revenue spent solely on the upkeep of British establishments and their officers.
मैं ये खेल पहले खेल चुका हूँ
कब
मैं अंग्रेज़ों दे लश्कर विच था एक दिन बर्दाश्त नहीं होया पिस्सुआं दे पुत्रां नूं सलाम फेंक के लौट आया मैनू अंग्रेज़ां नाल नफरत है
As a part of divide and rule, the British drafted specific people in the armies. And just like the interpreters, they gave them an elevated status and better salary. The northwest frontier was defended by the 6th in the British Army in the Anglo-Afghan wars throughout the 19th century.
सब जने खड़े खड़े मुंह काहे ताक रहे हो
अरे भुवन ना ना हम नहीं खेलेंगे
काहे का होई गवा
अरे ई ससुरा अछूत और हमरे साथ ना ना ई हमरे साथ नहीं खेल सकत पक्की बात हम एक अछूत के साथ अंदर नहीं मिलाएंगे अब हम ना खेलब भुवन
So this is really for people who don't really know the Indian caste system. This character of the untouchable is called Kachra, which literally means garbage. The way the Indian and mainly the Hindu society is structured meant that some people were sentenced to manual labor, often involving garbage collection, carcass clearance. They weren't allowed to possess dignified things like shoes or nice clothes, or to even have dignified names. And this dialogue
गोरों के साथ लड़ना धर्म है, पर एक अछूत का साथ लेके पूरा दूध भ्रष्ट होने नहीं देंगे हम।
really explains how divided the society was in and of itself, regardless of the British.
धज्जियां उड़ा दो इन फिरंगियों की, उड़ा दो धज्जियां, रौंद डालो कैप्टन रसल के अहंकार को।
Now, it's never really explained in the movie what kind of a rule or power Raja Puran Singh enjoys, but I bet he was a ruler of a princely state. After 1857, in order to avoid similar uprisings, Queen Victoria left around 560 enclaves all over India with autocratic princely rule to keep the kings happy with the British. They could get a share of the taxes and stay rich.
दोनों दल एक एक बार बल्लेबाजी करेंगे और 3 दिन का खेल होगा.
Now, this is just for people who don't know cricket that well. This match was played for 3 days, as a lot of matches back then were. But that doesn't mean all matches are as long. Back then, they were incredibly British and would break for lunch, tea, and whatnot. And I'm sure right now someone is already typing in my comments saying, yeah, but they got a lot of things wrong, and over back then used to have 8 balls, not 6. Let that go. Cinematic liberty, let's just call it.
कचरा की गेंद फिरकी का नहीं मारा था,
पता नहीं क्या बात है।
Another fun fact about cricket, a leather ball is specifically used for long cricket matches. Because over the course of the match, the nature of the ball changes depending on the wear and tear of the leather and offers a range of different bowling techniques.
कैप्टन रसल को अपने सन की बर्ताव की कीमत चुकानी पड़ी। उसे 3 गुना लगान भरना पड़ा और साथ ही उसका तबादला मध्य अफ्रीका के रेगिस्तान में कर दिया गया।
This shows, one, the extent of the British Empire already, where one officer could easily just be stationed somewhere else. But in the course of British colonial history, India really was, as they themselves called it, a jewel in the British crown. That as a punishment, Captain Russell was sent to a different continent where he probably wouldn't have been able to make as much money, which is just bizarre. And that's the end of the movie. I hope you liked this new format I used to inform people about the British Raj. And if you have suggestions for another movie I could cover to explore another history, do let me know. And as usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye!